Welcome in everyone to another episode of Clutch Scoops. As usual, Tomer Azarly here, your host, alongside my partner over here, Brett Siegel. Brett, it seems you've brought the storms from the East Coast over to the West Coast because we are getting nonstop rain out here, my friend. What's going on with this, man? What'd you do?
Yeah, it seems like I have brought the storm, right, Tomer? Because we were buried under about like a foot and a half of snow, and now we don't have any snow because it's been warm. And thank you for that warm weather from the West Coast, but I will gladly give you all the bad weather, but we may have more this weekend. We'll see what happens.
Uh, I want to jump into All Star. I mean, we saw All Star Weekend. First of many topics, as you can see that we have on the top. We'll start with All Star Weekend. Um, Overall, felt like a success. I think when you look at the totality of it, I think, at least from a broadcast standpoint, I think fans really enjoyed watching the games. The Sunday competition, which everyone complained about, the actual competition and the competitiveness. Um, we saw that being brought to life. We saw when Victor Wembanyama have a couple of hot shooting games. Kawhi Leonard obviously had that 31-point quarter to advance to the final. Um, before I start, Brett, I want to get your take on just All Star Weekend. What did you make of what we saw this weekend?
I thought that it was more competitive than usual, obviously, and that was the most talked about thing is finding a way to make the All-Star game likable again. A lot of people did not want to see these guys pulling up from half court, pulling up from three quarters court, and just out there having fun like they're playing on a park. And that's always kind of been what the All-Star game always is. You want these guys to have fun. It's not supposed to be game seven of the NBA Finals in terms of the intensity. But at the same time, you want to have a product that the fans like, they can watch, and it's not just like playing backyard basketball. And so I was happy to see that. Obviously, a lot of other people happy to see the competitiveness, and I think that you have to attribute that to all these young guys: Anthony Edwards, Cade Cunningham, even Tyrese Maxey was playing hard, and then obviously Victor Wembanyama really setting the pace for what that game was going to be. So I don't think that the new format necessarily attributes to that intensity and then playing defense and all that. I think it's just this younger generation saying, you know what, we're not going to follow in the old heads' footsteps of what the All Star game has become. We're going to make it ours. And that's what I really like to see from this. Obviously, the format, I'm of the opinion that I think that they should just do the traditional East versus West. I think that it makes the most sense. I'm old school, I'm traditional when it comes to that. So I would love to see them go back to that kind of format. I don't think that a four-quarter world versus USA would make all that much sense, but obviously they're going to keep this mini game mode and with these three teams, four teams, whatever it may be, because the ratings are up, the intensity is up in these games, and obviously the fan reaction was good from it.
Yeah, I think that the biggest takeaway one was you mentioned the young guys. They kind of separated the Team USA guys by the old guys and the young guys. And then you had obviously the Team World, which was star-studded on its own. Yeah, I think the young guys definitely brought it. Anthony Edwards obviously winning the MVP, and you had Kawhi Leonard was just absolutely hot in that third game, I believe it was, where he had 31 points, had the game winner over Karl Anthony Towns. You saw the competitiveness from I think it was Victor Wembanyama. He was pissed when Scotty Barnes hit the game winner, and so like you saw a lot of just fire in some of these guys, and I think that's you know it's not a serious game. It is just an exhibition, but you do want to see that kind of competitive fire. You do want to see guys play hard and play to win. You don't want to see guys chucking 35 footers, left and right, and just trying to tally up the score. So I thought that was fun. Um, I mean, there were other events though. I think that do need some cleanup, and I know you have some feelings about them. I'll start with the 3-point competition for myself. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun for them to include Damian Lillard in there, despite him, not playing at all this season. Obviously, a two-time winner prior to this event, now a three-time winner. Probably had those fresh legs, ready to go to shoot those three balls. But I thought it was fun overall. I mean, I think there were probably a couple of guys that I think Trey Murphy the third probably could have been included in that. But you look at some of the best 3-point shooters in the league by percentage. Bobby Portis is up there. And so, like all those guys, I think you went with the best 3-point shooter. So I didn't really have a problem with, the field, and I thought it was just a fun event. So for me, the 3-point competition was fun. That was always fun to me. I never have any gripes with that one. That one's just put the best shooters out there, and let's see who can get hot for 30 seconds to a minute.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at the 3-point contest, obviously next year we're going to have Stephen Curry. We're going to have potentially Klay Thompson. He said he's going to try to get Klay involved. We're going to see Damian Lillard do it again. Devin Booker has said that he wants to do it in Phoenix, where the All Star game is going to be in 2027. So you get those four guys. Now I think you can maybe include NBA legends here, and we saw that with the Shooting Stars, how the NBA wants to incorporate legends into these events. Maybe they get him back for the 3-point contest. Maybe you contact Ray Allen and he would be down to do it. Maybe Reggie Miller, even though he's a part of the broadcasting crew, maybe you could get him for a segment to do. Or you bring back some of the best 3-point shooters. Maybe you get the WNBA involved and you bring in Sabrina Ionescu or some other guys, Caitlin Clark. So I think that there's a lot of ways that they can reinvent the 3-point contest and continue to make that event the highlight of All Star Saturday. Because I'll tell you this, Tomer, the dunk contest, after watching it over the last few years, I think it's dead. I don't see any way in which they can bring this back. And I really don't know who they can potentially get for it because we're asking two-way players, even guys in the G League, to participate, and they're not willing to do it. And one example that I want to bring up, VJ Edgecombe from the Philadelphia 76ers. He's a rookie in the league, a guy that's probably going to finish third in the Rookie of the Year race between Con Knipple and Cooper Flagg. He's an all-rookie first-team performer. He didn't want to do it. He did not want to do the dunk contest, made it very clear that even if he was asked, which I'm sure the NBA reached out to him and asked him to participate, and the answer was no. He didn't want to play. And I think that that's very telling to this younger generation because you're probably leaving about $5 to $10 million in endorsement deals if you win on the table right there. And now they just don't want to participate, whether it's because they're going to get hurt. And after watching Jace Richardson fall, I held my breath because I thought he was actually hurt on that court. Thankfully, he wasn't. So between injuries and the event just going downhill, I don't know how you salvage it at this point. And quite honestly, I'd rather see them just get away from it, get away from the Shooting Stars, and just add this 1v1 or this 2v2 tournament that seems to be gaining a lot of traction between the players in the league.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think between it's a combination of one, just I think we've seen so many dunks just done over the years that there's not a lot of creativity left. I mean, I guess you could. I think, one of the more creative ones that I can remember that I haven't seen try to be done since was Gerald Green's little birthday cake, cupcake, blowing out the candle, all that. I thought that was, super creative. That was really fun. So like, I think there's still levels of creativity that we could see to it, but I think guys are worried about, the embarrassment factor of not being able to complete, a dunk or being on social media and being ripped for it, as we've seen how, all these news accounts or all these people just kind of run with different clips or bricks and or whatever. They all just, kind of mock these guys. So I think there's definitely a level of we don't want to even deal with that. And, we'll just pass on it and come back to it at a later time. So, but I'm with you. I think the 1v1, I think the 2v2, I think both of those would be extremely entertaining. I would love to see both of those. I would. I am curious if we could see, former teammates team up in that kind of manner. Could we see like a LeBron and Kyrie team up? Could we see Steph and KD team up? Like, I would love to see that kind of thing. I think that would be tremendous. That would be so much fun to watch. And there'd be a lot of bragging rights on the line. So I think those would, I think those two tournaments after a successful All Star Sunday, anyways, for NBC and the NBA, I think those two would have a lot of, intrigue for fans. I don't know how much players would want to do it, but I think it would definitely add a level of intrigue to Saturday night, which feels like all that's missing at this point. Friday is what it is. Everyone's kind of filing in. You have the celebrity game, the Rising Stars. You have Sunday now kind of figured out, the USA versus World. Now Saturday, just get that dunk contest or get those extra kind of contests filled up, or maybe just retooling around those little competitions and see what you have happen there. So, Brett, any last thoughts on the All Star Weekend before we move on?
Yeah, I just think that All Star Weekend in general, it's not that same level as when we felt as kids watching it. Of you see Kobe out there and some of the greats, and they're actually playing. They're dunking the ball. That they're playing on defense. And then over the last few years, it lost its touch. Obviously, this year with this mini tournament format, the intensity has gone up. But again, I think it's just attributed to these younger guys. I think that Victor Wembanyama is setting the standard for these young guys. Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, he's not necessarily a young guy like Wemby and Edwards, but he's still younger than some of those other guys like Steph and KD. But even guys like Jokic and Doncic, even though they were dealing with injuries, it just didn't seem like that when they were out there on the court, they didn't want to give it their all. And so I was kind of happy that they weren't playing more because we got to see more of these younger guys really play and really play on defense. So I think that it's going to be really interesting to see moving forward. And obviously, like I said, I think that they're going to continue this 3-team, 4-team, whatever it be, mini tournament format until they need to change it again.
I am very much looking forward to seeing if they can add a 1v1, 2v2 competition. I think that would be so intriguing to me.
Well, let me ask you
Move.
this real quick. Who would you pick in a 1v1 competition then? If it was everybody's participating, which they wouldn't, there would obviously be all stars sitting out. But who would you give the crown to? Is it just Wembanyama?
I mean, I guess it depends on would they? I know like some guys want to be part of All Star Sunday in order to be part of All Star Saturday. So like, I do wonder, how that would kind of work. Like I know a lot of guys are like, well, if I'm not playing on Sunday, then I don't want to do the 3-point contest or this contest. So Wemby probably will be the favorite. But I think Kevin Durant, one of the shiftiest, best scorers, at 7 feet tall, hard to pick against him. And I know we've had conversations about him for the last shot. Um, I think it's hard to pick against KD in a 1v1. I mean, he's got the speed, the height, the shot release. It's hard to block. Like again, Wemby's Wemby, but KD is just unstoppable 1v1 setting. If KD misses, it's mostly because of him, not because someone else affected him. I would say.
Give me Iguodala. Let's move on to the next
All
section,
right.
Tomer.
All right. All right. That's how we know we're done here. Thank you very much, Brett. Wow. Um, moving on to tanking. Tanking obviously is a big problem for the NBA, or so Adam Silver believes. There was, let me see the exact number it was. The NBA actually fined the Utah Jazz $500,000 for what they called conduct detrimental to the league by removing Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. from the game and not having them return. Um, that game was a single digit game for most of the second half. I don't think anyone took a double digit lead. I forgot who it was against, but I remember looking back at the box score. There was, or at the play by play, there was never a 10-point lead in that one. And Markkanen and Jaren Jackson did not return. Sort of, I guess, the Jazz way of just, kind of just, I guess, riding out the second half, letting the young guys develop while also, whatever happens, happens at that point. In addition to the Jazz, though, the Indiana Pacers were also fined $100,000 for violating the player participation policy in the game against the Utah Jazz on February 3rd, um, involving Pascal Siakam. He and a couple other starters they did not participate in the game, even though they could have under the NBA's medical standard and the policy. Um, the Jazz, by the way, the two games they were accused of conduct detrimental to the league was against the Orlando Magic on February 7th and Miami Heat on February 9th. Adam Silver talked about, just that issue at All Star Weekend. That was a hot topic of discussion. I think that might have been the first question, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Brett, I want to give you a chance to speak on it first. Just what did you kind of make of just the is it tanking? I guess at this point, is it kind of like a faux tanking of sorts by benching guys the second half instead of just resting them for the entire game? Like, what do you just make of just the fines and everything we're seeing going on right now?
Here's the thing. We entered this season knowing there were probably 4 or 5 teams that were going to be tanking. They were already looking ahead to the 2026 NBA draft. They already have guys on their big board knowing exactly who they want to target. And so we knew that they were going to go out there, win a handful of games, and then when the All Star break comes around, or even before then, trade deadline, everybody's going to be out. And they're going to be out with injuries, resting. We saw this last year. We saw it in 2023. We've seen it way back in the day, probably around the time when LeBron was first entering the league. This has been around for 20 plus years now of teams tanking. So the only reason it's in the spotlight now and why it's such a big ordeal and everybody's trying to fix the tanking problem when it's really not a problem, it's because of this draft, man. There are about 20, 23 guys that are legit lottery talent players. And that makes this arguably the most talented draft in NBA history. And I think that 10 years from now, we're going to be looking back at saying it was the most talented draft. But besides that, when we focus on the Jazz, if you're going to pull guys out of the game, just have them go back to the locker room. Even if it's to go to the bathroom or something, just say they have knee soreness and then roll them out for the rest of the game. Why would you just have them sit on the bench in their warm up gear with everyone knowing that they could go back in the game and play when you could have just ruled them out in the middle of the game? And I think if they did do that, there wouldn't have been this fine because how is the league going to say, oh, he didn't have knee soreness? There's no way to prove that. And so with some of these other teams like the Indiana Pacers, that's what they've done on the injury report. We've seen it with the Brooklyn Nets. We've seen it with the Washington Wizards. So don't tell me that the Jazz are the only team doing this. I think it's a little harsh for them to get fined 500 grand, especially when they're saying one of the games involved was against the Heat and they benched those guys and they went on to win. So if anything, we should be fining the Heat for losing that game.
I mean, I think there are pretty strict, protocols in place as far as the injury stuff. So I don't know how much they can actually just roll guys to the back and be like, all right, say you have knee soreness. And I think you do have to be around and visible to players, visible to fans, excuse me, on the bench. I believe that that's one of the policies in the player participation policy. I'm not exactly sure, but I remember hearing about that. I mean, Adam Silver's quote in the release that overt behavior like this that prioritizes draft position over winning undermines the foundation of NBA competition, and we will respond accordingly to any further actions that compromise the integrity of our games. Additionally, we are working with our competition committee and board of governors to implement further measures to root out this type of conduct. I'm not sure how you root out this type of conduct, especially, um, and I will say, it needs to be discussed how big gambling I think plays a factor in some of these things. You know, the amount of people who are betting on overs and unders and parlaying different things. You know, if you have a player sitting out the entire second half when you thought he was going to play and he's healthy, um, again, there are a lot of people who gamble probably a little too much, too heavily invested in this, and that's a different problem on its own. But you know, I think that that probably weighed heavily in some of these decisions to find these teams. But I honestly don't know what you can end up doing because you know the game against the Jazz Heat game, which the Heat lost, despite Utah sitting out Laurie and Jaren Jackson, like their bench was playing well. I think that a lot of their guys were playing well. They ended up leading them to a win. So like you can make a case where we ran with the guys who were hot, and that's we've seen coaches do that tons of times with reserves. It's not a surprise. It's not an issue in the past. So I definitely don't agree that the Jazz were the only ones who should have been fined. I think we've seen teams do this for yeah. You said 20 years. It feels like about 20 years now, where teams have started positioning themselves for the draft back in around the All Star break. So um, I think we just haven't seen it done this early, at least prior to the All Star break. So I just don't know what you do. I don't know how you go about fixing this because, people are saying abolish the draft. Well, a lot of teams, the smaller markets, don't have the ability to get talent outside of the draft. Like teams like Detroit, which no one is really picking to go to as a top free agent market, they are now good because of the draft. Charlotte is on the rise now because of the draft. Like you have a lot of these smaller markets that are on the rise because of the draft. So I don't know how you can just say abolish the draft. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't even know where the rationale for that is. That's not even a starting point for me. I don't know
If
about
you
you.
get
I
rid of the
don't see
draft,
that.
basically you're telling the agencies, hey, do you want your guy to go play in LA or New York, or do you want him to be marketed in some of these lesser markets? So that's just not an option to me. Like
It's a non-starter. It's a
you can't
non-starter.
talk about abolishing the draft. A, because it's needed for league transparency, and B, it's what has balanced this league through the years. Look at all these teams that are on the rise: the Thunder, the Spurs, the Pistons. They're not on the rise because of free agency. They are on the rise because of what they did in the NBA draft. And if you get rid of the draft, you're basically saying to five, six, seven teams that they're going to be championship contenders every year.
Yeah. So I agree. So I don't see how abolishing the draft is even. I saw so many people discuss that. And I'm like, how is that even a starter? That's not even a starting conversation. So yeah, I'm not sure what you do. There's definitely some level of problem here. I think overall tickets just need to go down. Ticket prices, concession prices, just all need to go way down because obviously you're here to watch a team and watch a product, but if that product is not going to be the best on the floor every night, like how do you justify just like King season ticket holders, for example, to go watch this team night in and night out? Like they're loyal fans, but that is a dumpster fire of an organization right now, all due respect. So I think overall, just ticket prices, concessions prices, all those need to go way. Parking prices, especially, not to call anyone out, but I think All Star Weekend parking prices were like $80 um, at the garage across the street. Like that's just too much for everyday fans. I think tickets right before the game were like $500. Like that's just way too much. I think if you actually want actual passionate fans and not just corporate sponsors, which they probably do end up wanting. So whatever. Um, you're not going to get a great turnout, a great product overall. So the solution to me is just I don't think people would have a problem with tanking as much if everything was more affordable. I think that would just be a big. That's where the starting point is for me. Make everything more affordable for these fans, from tickets to concessions to parking, so they can actually go enjoy a game. Like I think we're growing up in an era where kids can't even go to games that much anymore. Like everyday kids, not just the rich kids. So
And here's kind of where I'm going to build off of that too is there are certain fan bases that whether their team is good or not, they still show up for the team and they're going to continue to do that. The Thunder did that when they were not good. The Sacramento Kings, who haven't been good for a long time, they had a few good years with that De'Aaron Fox beam team run, But even through their worst times, they still have a lot of fans attending because those people love going to Kings games. So no matter what, no matter if the team is tanking, the fans are going to be there and they're going to watch the product if they support that team. And more importantly, tanking gives them more incentive to want to fall in love with the team, in my opinion, because you have a chance to get a Cam Boozer, to get an AJ DeBonsa, and not only is that going to increase your marketing perception around the league, but more fans are going to pile in to watch those guys. You're going to be bringing in a whole fan base from college and from the NBA draft and people that have been following these guys from high school and college. So I don't agree with the tanking problem is out of hand because it's the same as it has been in recent years. There's just more teams doing it. And if the solution is just to find these teams, well, you're asking a billionaire to pay 500 grand. That's like us dropping $5 bill on the street and not caring about it.
Yeah, I don't see that being the solution, finding teams. So we'll see what ends up happening there. I don't envision this being the last time teams get fined this season, especially with how loaded this draft is. I mean, I don't know, you've been here. I've heard there's like 10 superstar level players in this draft potentially. You mentioned about 20 real all-star level players potentially. So this is a loaded draft. I think teams are absolutely gearing up, to make a run here. For some draft picks. So, talk about that a little bit later on. But wanted to move on to some NBA trade deadline talks and some early offseason intel. Brett, John Morant did not get traded, and we talked about it after the trade deadline. I think some of us were a little surprised, but it was a little surprising, but also not really, given that Memphis just wasn't willing to sell low on him like the Hawks did with Trae Young. Um, and so, you wrote about it the other day, so I wanted to kind of give you the floor. What is kind of next here for John Morant after he wasn't traded at the deadline? I know we both reported on it, but you wrote about it recently. What's next for him?
Well, I see he's wearing that old school Vancouver Grizzlies jersey, one of the best throwback jerseys that there could be. But Vancouver, Canada, they were playing the gold medal match against USA. USA just won. So another gold medal for Team USA in the Olympics. But building off of John Morant and what are the next steps there, obviously he's dealing with that elbow injury right now. It's a UCL sprain. He suffered that when he went out for a block attempt, I believe it was. He was initially ruled out for about 2 to 3 weeks. Recently reevaluated yesterday, and the Grizzlies said it will be another 2 to 3 weeks until they have some kind of destination, some kind of word on what the rest of the season is going to look like. And obviously, I know you wrote about it, Tamara. You reported on how John Morant and his camp, they want to play for the rest of the season. He wants to come back. He does not want to sit on the bench, be a part of a tanking organization in the Grizzlies, who are very clearly going to be entering that route the rest of the year and developing their young talents. And also, John Morant, his future is not in Memphis anymore. I think that the organization made that very clear at the trade deadline when they were willing to accept him for virtually anything. They wanted to get a first round pick. No team was willing to do that. And he was perceived as having negative value around the league. So there's more incentive for him to play during this second half or the final 2 months of the season to increase that value and get more suitors out there interested in him so he can get to a destination that he wants to go to in the offseason. But that's basically where we're at, Tomer. He's going to be traded in the offseason. It's just a matter of A, how much the Grizzlies can get for him, and B, if John Morant goes to a suitable destination that he can have an actual future in.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing here is I think both sides need him to play. I don't even think it's a question. John Morant and his camp obviously want him to play, but the Memphis Grizzlies need John Morant to play to prove that one, he can stay healthy, but two, even be a suitable mentor for some of these young guys and still be effective on the court and contribute to winning basketball. Like there's just, I think while Ja has proven a lot, I think there's also so much still to be proven. And I think when you look at the inability to garner a legitimate trade market for him in the by the deadline, I think that's a bit of a you know um, indication that he needs to improve his value overall. And so we'll see. I think he's going to be reevaluated in a couple weeks. I think the Grizzlies and Ja were kind of hoping to be ready after the All Star break, so we'll see what happens with him. Um, I think all indications are he wants to come back and they want him to come back, but you never know if how these things kind of play out. They might try to play safe with him, make sure he's healthy and not injured or, worsening that UCL sprain in his elbow heading into the offseason. Whoever is trading for Jaw, and thus will probably want to, have extension talks with him. We'll want him to be 100% healthy or as close to 100%. So that is something to watch as well. But yeah, Ja, I mean, as you mentioned, will probably be traded in the offseason. His future is no longer in Memphis. So Despite him wanting to stay. I know he's wanted to stay. He's wanted to figure it out there, but Memphis just seems to be going in another direction with some of the young guys they've built, some of the draft picks that they've acquired as well. So we will see what happens in Memphis. But yeah, a full shift there, I think, from the offseason. Like we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Like they traded Desmond Bain to try and build around Jaren Jackson and John Morant. And within 4 months, 5 months, it was a complete rebuild, complete retool now. Jaren Jackson is gone. Jaw's probably on his way out. So we'll see what happens there. Anything to add on the Morant front, Brett?
I think it kind of leads us into our next topic. Obviously, we're going to talk about Kawhi Leonard, but down the road, we're going to talk about trades that didn't happen. And real quick, John Morant, one of them. I mean, the Milwaukee Bucks were a team that had interest in John Morant trying to buy low. It was something revolving around Ryan Rollins and one of those salary fillers, whether it was Bobby Portis, Kyle Kuzma, whatever it be. But no draft pick compensation. They wanted to get John Morant low, and obviously that just wasn't going to happen from the Grizzlies' point of view.
Yeah, Memphis did not want to take on any unnecessary salary that Milwaukee's been trying to dump. So, yeah, that wasn't going to happen. But I'm sure those talks will be revisited in some capacity, especially with, Milwaukee and Giannis staying staying there and seeing what happens, seeing if they can figure it out, retool in the offseason. But before we talk about Giannis and some stuff later on, Kawhi Leonard's future might be a little bit up in the air. I think the Clippers about 2 weeks before the NBA trade deadline. We asked Tyronn Lue about the plans, and he said, I don't envision us making too many moves. This should be a really relatively quiet deadline for us, maybe some moves on the margins. And then, James Harden came to the Clippers and asked for that trade to the Cavs. The Cavs, offered Darius Garland. They made that swap. Shortly thereafter, Ivica Zubats. The Pacers became incredibly aggressive in their pursuit of Zubats and offered picks that the Clippers just simply could not turn down. This year's pick protected 1 to 4 and 10 to 30, and then a 2029 as well. So the Clippers quickly shifted from we're going to try and keep this core to we're now going younger. We got Benedict Mathurin, Darius Garland, Isaiah Jackson, a couple of draft picks here, and Kawhi Leonard, who's still playing fantastic basketball, is some questions about him. I think teams were calling the Clippers about him, but I think it was just such a tiny window, such a short time frame to try and pull a trade for a star like that it really didn't materialize. So, Brett, before I talk about it a little bit more, what's your just insight on Kawhi Leonard and his future after the Clippers made some trade deadline moves here?
Well, I think even before we go into the whole offseason matter, there's still this aspiration case going on, still that investigation into what's going to happen with Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers. Is the NBA going to come down with a big hammer on them and punish them severely, or are they going to void Kawhi Leonard's contract? I think those are still valid questions that are being brought up around the league. I know our friend and colleague over at The Athletic, Sam Amick, had a piece that talked about that, how the expectation right now is that there's going to be some kind of steep penalty for this and that there's a growing expectation for that. So we'll see how this plays out. We don't have any more information on that. The NBA has been very tight-lipped on what they're investigating directly and what their results and findings are from that. But I think that that's a big piece to the puzzle, obviously, Tomer, of what's going to happen with Kawhi. Obviously, at the trade deadline, there were teams interested in him, and we reported and we were told at ClutchPoints that there were two teams in particular that were pursuing Giannis that had made calls to the Clippers about Kawhi Leonard and checking in on his availability. So I think obviously if he's still on the Clippers roster heading into the summer and his contract is not voided, he's going to be entering the final year of his deal. I believe it's like $50.3 million. And regardless of how old he is, as long as he's healthy, it's going to be viewed, like we mentioned on this show last week, another scenario of when the Spurs traded him to the Toronto Raptors. Final year of his contract, he can still be a big piece on a championship team, even though that's years later. But we saw what Kawhi Leonard can do. We even saw it during the All-Star game. I think it was, 31, 32 points in that 12-minute frame. So that's the type of player that championship teams want. He's won a championship before. He's been an MVP caliber player. And so Kawhi Leonard, I think that it's a huge question mark, not just what happens in the middle of this season, but then entering the summer. He's going to be one of the biggest names discussed.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say after the trade deadline and how everything kind of materialized that I think a lot of people within the organization were a little surprised, a little shocked. I don't think anyone really envisioned James Harden wanting out or wanting an opportunity to go to Cleveland. I think everyone thought they were going to kind of ride it out. And then the Zubats trade obviously shifted things beyond just this season or the next season into the future. And so I think, for what we were told, Leonard was definitely surprised. And I think, I think on some level, probably questioning a little bit of what his future looks like. But he and the Clippers front office have had a great relationship over the last couple of years since he's gotten here. There's been no, issues or frustrations. I think they've been, working together well on both sides. So, I think when the off season comes, I think they'll both sides will come together and see what direction both want to go in. I think Kawhi Leonard mentioned after the trade deadline he thinks there's a path here to him staying and kind of helping to usher in the next generation of Clippers basketball, where he's maybe a little bit of the old head, the vet guy who can contribute, but is not the focal point night in and night out. And so right now the Clippers need him to be because Darius Garland is out and some of these guys are still learning the system, but. Um, I think the Clippers and Kawhi Leonard will revisit, just where things are in the off season, and go from there. And that's not to say that this relationship is coming to an end by any means. I think there's a very good chance that this continues. They've had again a great relationship since he's gotten here. There's been no ill will or anything like that. So I think it was just a shock with what happened in the trade deadline, but. Both sides are continuing. I know Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers are both focused on this season, trying to get into a play-in spot and maybe even a playoff spot and seeing what can happen. This team, when healthy, I think could be interesting. I'm not saying they could win a playoff series, but they could be frustrating some teams out there. So we'll kind of see what happens. They have a month and a half here till the end of the season.
That's great and all, and I completely agree with you from that point of view. Where the Clippers, they have a great relationship with him, and I'm sure that they love Kawhi Leonard. They've been with him for the last 4 or 5 years, and everyone always talks about how great a teammate Kawhi is and how great a guy he is. So can definitely understand that. But from the front office standpoint, and if you're looking at this through the lens of the Clippers' future, it probably makes a lot more sense to just trade him in the offseason because how much longer do you really see yourself if you're the Clippers having Kawhi Leonard be a part of this team? Because you went a lot younger. You got Benedict Mathurin, who you're expecting to give a contract to in the offseason. You have Darius Garland, who's significantly younger. It seems like that this is going to be a youth movement for the Clippers. And also, maybe you can take on some bad salaries that other teams don't want in the form of draft picks. Maybe you take on a guy that's making $18 million for the next 3 seasons and then you are able to replenish some of that draft capital that you lost in 2027, 2028, 2029. And then all of a sudden, you can instantly retool this roster around Darius Garland, Benedict Mathurin with those draft picks that you're bringing back. So these are all just different concepts. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I'm just talking hypothetically here of what every front office is going to be thinking about, and especially the Clippers front office, where they have to consider their future of the organization and not just what's happening now with Kawhi Leonard and that everything has been good with him and his camp over the last 4 or 5 years. They have to see this as a guy on an expiring contract. He has the most value that he's ever going to have at this point in his career, and then you're going to have to make some tough decisions.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think you definitely with the moves you've made, you're definitely looking at the future, and so I think you should continue to do that. The flip side of that is this offseason, the Clippers, could enter the Giannis sweepstakes if he is available. They would have four very very good draft picks, including the two Pacers ones that teams could be interested in. The Bucks could be interested in with a couple of young players. So could you pair Giannis and Kawhi together? That could be an interesting combo there if you're able to. So, while I think there is a youth movement. There's definitely everything on the table as far as continuing to contend, maybe trading for a star. They're leaving cap space open for this year, for 2027, even though they acquired Darius Garland. So there's still, everything's on the table with this team and their future plans. So we'll kind of see what happens there. I do want to move on to our next topic and some of the trades around the league that did not happen at the trade deadline that were rumored to for what felt like weeks. We'll start with Mr. Sabonis, Mr. Domantas Sabonis, who just underwent surgery, a season-ending surgery to repair a meniscus tear. So obviously his season is over. What was the latest with Sabonis? How close was he to actually being a Raptor, or even going elsewhere, Brett?
Yeah, so Domantas Sabonis, we reported on it in the weeks leading up to the NBA trade deadline that the Raptors and Kings were having advanced discussions on a trade package that involved RJ Barrett, Ochai Abaji, and Jakob Poeltl, of that being the centric pieces in a trade to send Domantas Sabonis to Toronto. Obviously, the big holdup there was Jakob Poeltl's contract because he's on a deal until I believe it's the 29-30 season. So you're talking about 4 or 5 years that a team would have to be paying him over $20 million. And that's something that the Kings, who are a rebuilding team, they're entering tank mode in the final 20-25 games of this year. They didn't want to take on that contract long term. So they were trying to find a third team that would be interested. The Grizzlies were one of those teams, as we reported. that would have had interest and they could have absorbed his contract using that new traded player exception that they created when they traded Jaren Jackson Jr. to the Utah Jazz. Obviously, again, just something that was explored, did not happen. Domantas Sabonis remains with the Kings. But now entering the summer, I think that based on where the Kings end up in this draft lottery, it's going to be telling as to what the future holds for Domantas Sabonis, for DeMar DeRozan with his partially guaranteed contract, Zach LaVine entering the final year of his contract and having hand or wrist surgery recently. So those are all questions that the Kings are going to have answered once they get to the NBA draft, and they're going to be an organization that obviously looks to add more guys to the draft. Maybe there's a way that they can trade Sabonis or someone else to get another draft pick, and they can move up into the lottery or the top 20 to add another high-level talent next to Keegan Murray and next to Nick Clifford and next to what is presumed to be a top 5 pick in the 2026 NBA draft. So that's where the Kings are at right now. We'll see what happens with Sabonis entering the offseason, but that's a trade that did not happen. I certainly expect those talks between Toronto and Sacramento to once again reignite in the offseason.
Yeah, Sacramento's an interesting team because they have a lot of these vets that should be on the move, or we've heard would be on the move. Malik Monk was also a guy that I think they've been trying to trade for quite some time. And then you look at the actual core with Keegan Murray, with Nick Clifford, with Maxime Reynaud, and Dylan Cardwell, who's now going to miss some time with an ankle sprain. Like, they have a really good core there. Core of young guys, anyways. That you add in a top 5 pick potentially, maybe even another first rounder somewhere in there. Like, I think there's potential for this team to be good, or at least start the rebuilding process, anyways. But a lot of that just has to you got to get find ways to move off of DeRozan, LaVine. Like, what is going on with LaVine? It's assumed that he's going to pick up his player option. Anyone would be crazy to turn down a $49 million player option, but what are their options with LaVine? Is he going to be a guy that's on the block? Are they going to have buyout talks with him even? Like, what are they going to do with him?
Quite honestly, unless the Kings are willing to take on contracts that they don't want, which they've signaled that's not going to be the case, that they want to have clean books moving forward, I don't see any other option other than if they tried to buy him out in the offseason or just simply waive him and pay him $49 million. But if you're the Kings, why would you do that? If you're going to pay him $49 million anyways, you might as well have him as the featured star on your roster to try to mentor some of these young guys. So I think it comes down to what LaVine and his camp ultimately want. Do they still want to be in Sacramento and just finish this contract? And then obviously from the Kings' perspective, why waive a guy for $49 million when you're going to be paying him anyways? Just keep him on the team. So I think that's where we're at with Zach LaVine, and that's where we're at really with this Kings and Toronto saga with Domantas Sabonis. It's going to be something that gets revisited in the offseason. But some other deals that we reported on at Clutch Points that did not happen. Yves Missi, I think, was a very interesting name that kept being brought up for teams looking for center help. He was linked to the Celtics. He was linked to Toronto. Indiana was a team with heavy interest in Yves Missi before they landed Zubac from the Clippers. Then you had the Chicago Bulls. That was a team that I was told had significant interest in Yves Missi, and they were actually trying to flip some of those second round picks that we mocked last week. Tomer, we were saying, what are they going to do with all these second round picks? Well, they were trying to package some of them with some of those contracts, the expiring deals that they got back to get Yves Missi from the Pelicans. Obviously, that's not something that New Orleans wanted to do. They were strict. They wanted a first round pick for Yves Missi, and they wanted one that was coming up, whether it was 2026, 2027, you name it. And so that's going to be another conversation I think is revisited in the offseason, whether it's with the Bulls or another team looking for center help. One team I'd like to mention that we've reported over the last year had interest in Missi is the Los Angeles Lakers. That they're going to be in the market looking for a center, and maybe they can get Missi on a cheap price for a first round pick. But that's what the Pelicans are going to be looking for, and they're going to be very aggressive trying to not only move up into the 2026 first round, but maybe get an additional first round pick as well.
Yeah, Yves Missi obviously highly coveted, and I think the Pelicans probably trying to shift into a different era here with Derek Queen there, and who knows what they end up doing with Zion Williamson. We know they have five or six untouchables, so we'll see what they end up really doing there at the end of the season and the NBA draft and beyond. Another guy that was mentioned that we talked about a couple times, but never really saw a trade materialize there was Mavs center Daniel Gafford. I think he's obviously on a good deal. I think he signed his extension this past summer. A guy who's a lob threat, a good rim runner, a decent rim protector. Who was kind of in the hunt for Daniel Gafford? Was he actually close to being traded, or was this mostly just trade discussions?
Yeah, I would say it was more advanced discussions than just general talk. There was obviously some smoke there to the talks with the Atlanta Hawks, and then the same with the Indiana Pacers. But again, it came down to the Mavericks asking price, where They wanted an immediate first round pick for Daniel Gafford, and the Hawks, they were not going to give up their swap of Milwaukee Bucks slash New Orleans Pelicans, and rightfully so. I don't think any team in this league would give up that pick at this point. And then the other pick that they had, it was like a conglomerate of three or four teams that they could potentially get a pick in the middle of the first round. I think right now it's Cleveland, and that's going to be somewhere in like the 20 to 23 range. That's a pick that the Mavericks would have been interested in. Hawks were not willing to give that up to get Daniel Gafford, and so the Mavericks kind of resurfaced talks with the Pacers, who were also interested there, and they were talking about a Gafford trade centered around Benedict Mathurin. But the problem with the Mavericks is that they didn't want Mathurin because they didn't want to deal with his contract talks this offseason. So now you can kind of see how these talks at the trade deadline, not just for Gafford, but some of these other teams, what they're really thinking about. That's why a lot of these deals that get reported on ultimately stall out and end, because there's just a lot of complications with the money nowadays with the first and second aprons. And then obviously Mathurin's restricted free agency. We saw how that played out for some of the big names this past offseason. That's something a lot of teams don't want to deal with. And so that's where talks basically ended. The Raptors were never really heavily pursuing Gafford. He was an option for them, but they were looking at other names as well, and they were still talking with the Kings about Domantas Sabonis there. So Gafford will be an interesting name entering the offseason. The Mavericks are obviously in a position where they're going to continue to build around Cooper Flag. They're going to look to get younger, and they're going to look to clean their cap sheet. And I think that other than Gafford, the one big name that we should try to keep an eye on, whether it's a buyout in the offseason or a potential trade, is Klay Thompson, because he's going to be in the final year of his contract. He doesn't seem to fit their timeline anymore, and he wants to be on a team that's going to be contending for a championship. So I would keep an eye on Klay Thompson, what's going to happen with him around the time of the draft.
It seems like a lot of these trades also maybe not fell through, but didn't, really reach the advanced stage because of this draft. I think teams are just unwilling to give up picks in this upcoming draft, given how many, star level players are potentially available. The opportunity to even jump a couple picks. Maybe we see some action once the lottery's done and we see who fell, who jumped up. Maybe we see some movement there. But yeah, a lot of moves that were discussed but didn't really happen. Brett, any other trades you want to discuss that didn't happen before we move on to our final segment today?
I think we'll hold off on that for now. I think that a lot of the chatter around the league this year was a lot of posturing from teams and just trying to get value, because, like you said, it's a very loaded draft class, and teams are going to be eyeing all of those lottery picks and trying to move up into the first round by leveraging future assets and future first round picks to get additional first round picks this year.
Our last topic of the day is the future of LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers. I think while this is the team that LeBron has played the longest with in consecutive years, 8 years now with the Lakers. But that appears to be coming to an end. At least that's what the talk around the league has been. I think there was the article about Genie busting LeBron that came out about a few weeks ago or a month ago. I think there was obviously the Anthony Davis, Luka Doncic trade, which I think on some level, that was LeBron's guy, and I think Luka and LeBron probably have a great relationship. I think he likes having a say in some of these trade roster building decisions, or at least some input. So, Brett, what is the latest on LeBron and his future with the Lakers or with another team?
Yeah, I mean, we reported on it right after the trade deadline, Tomera, in our big intel piece, and obviously that's still up, and you can find it on ClutchPoints. It was our intel of why the Grizzlies didn't deal John Morant after the Jaren Jackson trade, the Ivica Zubac trade, the shocker there, and the fallout, and some of these other deals that fell apart. You can check out that story still on ClutchPoints. But we also talked about LeBron's future and how everyone around the league, even at the trade deadline, felt that his time with the Lakers is over, and that it seems like he's going to be going back to Cleveland. And that's been the notion ever since that road game in Cleveland. Obviously, the Luka Doncic injury was the big highlight of that game because he fell off that elevated court, and there were all the stories about why they even have an elevated court there. But it was also such an emotional return for LeBron. We saw him crying in the pregame introductions and wiping tears away from his eyes. And we know how much that city means to him. It's where he's from, it's where he still has family, and he does a lot for that community still, even though he's halfway across the nation in LA. So I think that for year 24, at this point, I'd be shocked if he doesn't go back to Cleveland. And I just see him taking a discount to do so, whether it's a minimum deal, whether they clear cap space to offer him something else. I just don't see any way, A, he returns to the Lakers, and B, why he would want to finish his career with some new team, whether it's the Mavericks or whether it's the Warriors. It just makes so much sense for him to finish his career where everything all started. Go back to the Cavs. They're going to have James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley. Maybe they make other moves to beef up that roster, and they're probably going to be the number one team entering the year in the East next season if they land LeBron.
Yeah, I mean that roster alone, if you look at it right now, you didn't mention Jared Allen, obviously a trade candidate, but I think a guy that's been playing really well for them. Some of their other guys, Sam Merrill's been playing really well. Jalen Tyson, Naquan Tomlin, like they've had a lot of really, really good pieces around their stars in Donovan Mitchell and James Harden and Evan Mobley. So, um, when healthy, I mean, LeBron's pretty easy to plug and play in any situation. That Cleveland team, that Cavaliers team, one would just make a great, return story for him to kind of cap off his career, give him the storybook ending, be able to play 41 games at home, have his retirement tour, whatever. But also that team would just be competitive. That team would be very, very competitive in the Eastern Conference. That, who knows what it looks like next year, but right now there's probably just less than a handful of teams I would say are really, up there as championship contenders. Maybe the Celtics, the Knicks, and the Pistons right now. I don't see really anyone else aside from the Cavs in that group. So, LeBron heading to the Cavs makes the most sense. I agree with you. There's been a lot of buzz there, and it seems like that's where we're headed. And frankly, I would be a little surprised if that's not what ended up happening. Next offseason, LeBron going there for one final year.
Yeah, I mean, it makes so much sense from the storybook sense of year 24 and finishing it up your third time in Cleveland where everything began. But it's also the notion that I discuss with people, whether it's scouts or league executives, you name it, other agents, they just don't believe that he would quit at the end of the year and say that's it and leave. Like, this is a guy that embraces the spotlight, and he's a guy that won't want to just end after a failure of the season if the Lakers lose in the first round or the second round. He's going to want to finish his career on a high note, and he's going to want to be somewhere that he can potentially contend for a championship. And you can do that in the Eastern Conference with how wide open it is. Cleveland, they'll probably be willing to take him on and open up a roster spot for him. So it just makes so much sense, and that's why I say, Tomer, everybody around the league is in agreement that they just are already penciling in LeBron to go to Cleveland next season.
All the Cavs have to do is go back to the throwback unis, and they will sell out of those instantly. People will be buying LeBron throwback jerseys, and they're gonna have Harden and Donovan Mitchell. That's gonna be a hell of a team to watch.
Well, you talk about the tanking problem. You talk about teams that don't have good attendance. I tell you what, if there's a LeBron James retirement tour, they're gonna have good attendance that night.
That's true. That's true. Everyone's gonna be in town to watch the Cavs. Um, as usual, Tomer Azarly here. That's Brett Siegel. This was Clutch Scoops. We'll let you guys know when we're going live next, hopefully next week, with some more information for you or some more, general NBA talk now that the season is back underway, second half of the season here post All-Star break. But yeah, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you guys.